Greetings all, and welcome to Luca Sprues. Now, a couple months back, I think it's about 4 by now, I ordered the Airfix ME410 from my hobby shop. However, unfortunately, the supplier for Airfix has been out of stock since then, so I've gotten a little bit tired of waiting and decided in the meantime to grab Italeri's reissue of their ME410 in 1/72nd scale. And I thought we'd have a little inbox review, and at some point I'll do a build video on it as well. And hopefully at some point the Airfix kit will eventually arrive and I will do the same for it and be able to compare the two. So, as normal, we'll start off by having a look at the box. So on the top here we've got the titles, Me410 A-1 Hornisse, which is German for Hornet. And the A1 is basically the light bomber version. There was also the A2, which was a proposed fighter version, but they didn't have the cannon armament ready in time, so it was skipped. And they had the A3, which was the photo reconnaissance version, and then there's way too many other versions that have different kits and that sort of thing for extra armaments. So this kit will be focused on the basic bomber version, but we've got some nice art of the aircraft flying through a bit of cloud. It's pretty simple, but honestly it looks really quite nice seeing it there with its mottled camouflage and the yellow bands and a little bit of fuel and oil leaking, and yeah, it looks a little bit messy but looks quite nice flying through the clouds there. And as you can see, it says we've got the super decal sheet, so that's basically just Italeri have quite a few different markings included. Sadly, what's not included with them is figure kits, but that's alright. I know not everyone likes to have a figure for their cockpit, but the artwork looks quite nice. On the sides, you've just got a repeat of the box art. On the top here, we've got one of the schemes included, and also a picture of the decal sheet and a marking saying it was printed by cartograph. So you know these are going to be really nice decals. They tend to do some of the best. And on the back here we've got the different schemes included. So you've got option A, which is from Sgt.Karl. I'm not going to attempt to say all these German names because I'm sure I will butcher them terribly, but that's sort of later or early 1944 in April. Then we've got this one, which is from SG-152, or the first, yeah, this is going to be a fun video, isn't it? So we've got this one, which is from the first SG-152 from the Czech Republic in May 1944. We've got another one here, which is from the, again, ZG-26, the second group, in July 1944, so a little bit later on, and it switched from the yellow to the white, which is a bit interesting. And then we've got another one here from Italy in the summer of 43, so probably one of the earlier A1s to come out, and it's part of ZG1. So yeah, some pretty similar schemes since all the German aircraft were pretty standard even still at the this stage. But yeah, you can see there's a few different ways that the camouflage patterns are applied with the typical RLM 74, 75 and 76. So that's quite nice. A few sort of various warnings. On the bottom here, they've got a bit of history about the 410, sort of just talking about its origins being to replace the 110 and the fact that it was a redesign from the failed 210 and the 310 series. So, with the box out of the way, let's open it up and have a look at the instructions and the sprues. So with the instructions on the front here, we've got that same description that's on the fuselage side, although I think they do go to a little bit more detail here talking about the 410. Then if you open it up here, we've got a few different warnings and a few little keys. There's only really drill holes cut and the parts that aren't used in this particular kit. Then we've got a sprue map for A, B and C, so there's two grey ones here and then the clear sprue there. We've got the colours up here, and I believe they use the Italeri colour codes, so you might have to translate them to another paint brand. So assembly starts with the cockpit, as most kits do. So it looks like you've got a couple of seats, one for the pilot and one for the gunner, a little instrument panel for the gunner here, a joystick, and then two of the side panels for the pilot. Seatbelts are included as decals, which is a nice touch. I really am a fan of the little seatbelts that come in the Italeri kits, although it looks like there's no instrument panel decals, so you have to paint them up yourself, which is a little bit of a pain, but oh well, it's not the end of the world. Then you're assembling the engines here, so there's the spinner which goes in between the two halves before you join them, and then a little wash on the back, so if you don't glue that to the engine cowlings, you will be able to spin the propeller. Looks like there's some exhaust guards, and then maybe that's part of the radiator on the inside there. So not super clear on how to put them together, but still clear enough. You can tell that you've got to put something in there, just as long as you don't miss the 11A, which is a little bit harder to see there. Then we've got what looks like a little bomb cradle assembly. So you've got two bombs, probably 250 or maybe 500 kilo bombs, and then some little supports. I think this might be for the bomb bay. Then you've got the two wing halves, so there's a fair bit of drilling that you've got to do for versions B and C. And I believe that would be for fuel tanks, which are included in this kit for some of the aircraft. There's also another radiator that you've got to put into place, and looks like a little bit of an internal part for the landing gear. Then you put the wing halves onto the bottom half, which looks like the bottom half's one piece, and then you've got two upper parts there. Then we're back to the fuselage, so there's a separate nose piece with all the glass screens or canopy frames in the nose there. Putting the fuselage in, painting the sidewalls. Don't think there's any sidewall detail on this kit, but that's kind of to be expected. Not all of Italeri's kits, especially the older ones, have any. Then you're putting the barbets in for the cannons at the back there, and or machine guns, I should say. And then it looks like you've put your horizontal stabilizers into the tail and joined the fuselage halves. Then you've got the two engine assemblies and the wing assemblies, so just joining those ones up, all pretty simple. Then you've got the undercarriage, which is a single strut with then two separate pieces for the wheels and then a flap for the landing gear bay doors. Then you've got the tail wheel in the back there, and you can attach the propeller and the spinner cover to the base of the propeller hub there. So the cockpit comes as three sections. So you've got the middle section, which comes as two pieces that you join together, and then the front canopy frame section. Looks like you've got some of the gunner's controls and sights that you stick into the gunner's compartment there, and then you're putting the barrels for the machine guns into the barbets and the pitot tube into the wing there. Looks like you've got a few options for extra armament or fuel tanks, so there's either two of these rockets for each side of the wing, and then two fuel tanks for the entire aircraft there. So some optional extra armament or fuel if you want. Got a few of the finer details, a couple of little antennas, landing gear, flaps for the tail wheel. Looks like some of the little balances for the controls to make them a little bit easier for the pilot to use. Then you've got your bomb bay doors, which interestingly are just for version B to C, so maybe there'll be some others. It's got some information on decal placements. Decals 13 apply after painting. A bit weird that they've included that halfway through assembling this kit rather than at the end on like a separate page like this, but oh well, they've got the markings there for numbering the bulkheads. Then we're installing the bomb bay doors if they're opened, and it says that's for versions A to D, so maybe that's not, there's no bomb bay available for versions B and C, that's just for A and D. So anyways, to have them in the open position, looks like you've got to actually cut them in half, but then you can glue them into place along with the bombs for the underside. There's also the fuel tanks, which are for version A and D, or the rockets, which are for versions B and C. And once you've put those parts on, the aircraft is all finished, and you can move on to painting. So you've got the first scheme here, which is ZG26, and you can see all the decal placements there. It's all pretty easy to see, and it's also in colour, which I think is really nice. Italeri have started doing that more and more with their booklets. I probably should also point out it's a booklet rather than the fold-out instructions, which I am a big fan of, so well done for Italeri on doing that with this kit. The colour guides are really easy to follow now that it's in colour, which is good. Here you've got the second scheme there, so that is for SG152 from the Czech Republic. A little bit different, it's got the white spinner and none of the yellow markings on the underside, and I think it's got a similar kind of mottling pattern. So this is one of those aircraft where you want to get pretty good at mottling. We've got the one from ZG26. It's got more of like a liney kind of pattern, so it looks like the ground crew or maybe the pilot or whatever have actually sprayed sort of squiggly lines over all of the lighter areas on the upper surfaces there, which is a little bit different. And then the last aircraft we've got here is pretty similar to the first two, but it's got red spinner instead, and it's from Italy and a little bit earlier on in the 410's career. So it looks like there's a nice choice of decals, and the layout of the instructions is pretty good. There's a few areas where it's a little bit messy, like for me the engine cowling there is a little bit harder to read, but it's still not too bad. Bit weird that they've put the decal placement for some of the common markings halfway through the instructions, so that's easy to miss, but Otherwise, the instructions look pretty good. So, as I've mentioned, we have 2 sets of dark grey plastic, which actually looks a little bit darker than usual for Italeri, which is interesting, all in one bag. And then there's a smaller bag in here which contains all of the clear parts. So I might set this aside actually, and we'll have a look at the dark grey plastic first. The first set of sprues here, we've got quite a fair few little things to look at, so I'll start in this corner. So we've got the engine cowlings here, and as you can see, all of the details are recessed. Looks like there's a few little filler caps or ports and that sort of thing, and a few little hatches here and there. So yeah, details are looking all quite nice, and there doesn't seem to be too many imperfections or anything. Looks like we've got the bomb bay here, which has a little seam in the middle there for the door. No detail on the inside of that, and there's a few little ejector pin marks. So if you're going to have the bomb bay doors open, I would probably recommend sanding those back and maybe adding some ribbing or something into the inside there to make it a little bit more detailed. Looks like these are the holders for the rocket pods, so they look like they've got a few little marks here and there to join things up. Tiny bit of flashing on the edges of those parts there, but it's really nothing too much. Looks like some other smaller parts here, not too sure what all of them are. Oh, these would be the exhausts. Yeah, there we go. That's interesting, they've actually molded the covers to the exhausts, so that will make it a little bit easier to assemble. And it looks like it's preserved most of the detail there, all pretty good, so yeah, that's nice. The horizontal stabilizers just here, again it's all recessed details. They've made the line between the control surface a lot deeper than the other panels, which all looks pretty nice. Doesn't appear to be too many imperfections or anything at all really. Maybe there's a little bit of flashing on the edge, but it's so subtle, it's very fine. So that looks pretty nice. Couple of covers here might be if you don't have the cannon's turrets on the fuselage sides, but not too sure about that. Looks like we've got some of the rockets' heads there, which will look pretty good when they're glued inside of there. And as for the wings themselves, as you can see, you've got the upper surface wings here, which this one's already come loose of its sprue. Details again similar to the engine cowling, it is all recessed. Maybe it's a little bit heavier than most kits, or it should be, but oh well, you can soften it with a little bit of work. There does seem to be a bit of overlap on this particular panel with these 2 recessed lines going into it, so I'm not sure, you might want to use a little bit of filler to cover that up. And there does appear to be a few little imperfections on some of the recessed lines, but honestly on the whole, detail looks pretty good. You've got all the access hatches and filler ports for the fuel and the oil. On the underside here, a few little inspection tabs and some nice details on the control linkages there. And yeah, it's all looking pretty good. Looks like they've got some molded air intake of some kind on the leading edges of the wing there. And they're all pretty good. There's barely any flashing on them at all, so that's pretty cool. And on the inside you can see there's the clear holes to drill out for the fuel tanks or the rocket pods, depending on what you want to add to your aircraft and which one you're building. Not too sure what these pieces are. I have a feeling they are part of the landing gear, the part that goes on the inside there. So it looks like there's a few little holes to help fit the landing gear and then slide those into place on the wings. But on the whole, looks pretty good. Not too many imperfections. A few little bits of flash here and there, but nothing that can't be cleaned up. And as for the second sprue here, we've got a lot more finer parts. So I might start down in this corner here with the fuselage. So as you can see, it's again all recessed details, and they've done a really nice job doing them all. They're all very cleanly molded. There's maybe a tiny bit of flash on the edges of the tail there, but honestly, they're pretty clean molds. Oh yeah, a few little bits here and there, but nothing too significant. They've molded in some of the antennas at the bottom, which maybe for some people they're a little bit thick and out of scale, but I honestly think that's pretty nice that they've done that, and they'll be nice and strong. Looks like you've got some fuel tanks as well here, which have some nice molded details, so looking pretty good. Then we've got the bombs, which they look like bombs, and the molds are pretty clean on them as well. Spinners here, which have got a little seam line for part of the covering there. I'll try. Spinners here for the propellers, which have got a little recessed panel in them, which looks pretty good. Some smaller bombs, although I think these might actually not be part of this kit, because they were some of them that weren't listed, or listed in the instructions as not for this kit. Then you've got the joystick there, which has some really nice little details on it. It looks pretty good. It looks like the back of the propeller spinners there, which have some little links to, or little walls there to help line up the propellers, which all look pretty good. Then there's the propellers themselves, which are quite nice and cleanly molded. They've actually got a weird kind of hexagonal nut kind of thing on the front of them. I'm not sure if that's on purpose or if that's kind of just a molding accident, but yeah, it looks like it might be a tiny bit of detail, but you won't really see that because it would be covered by the propeller covers anyways, of the spinners. Got the little pins here that go at the back of the propeller hubs, which the gap between them and the cowling must be really, really small, so I'd imagine the propellers will be pretty tight, even if you do manage to get them to spin. A couple of antennas and pitot tubes and that sort of thing, all of them are pretty cleanly molded. There's a few little spots where there's some imperfections, but honestly, on the whole, it looks pretty good. Looks like the barrels for the cannons or machine guns, one of the two. And then you've got your instrument panel, which is pretty basic. It's sort of just a few raised details or circles for the instrument gauges, so nothing too fancy. A couple of other little fine parts here. Looks like you've got the balancers for the controls. Looks like these are part of the bomb bay, or the bits that hold onto the bombs themselves. So they look pretty good. Then you've got the tail wheel here, which has got some really nice detail on it. You can see all of the hub there and the tyre. It all looks really quite cleanly molded. There's no imperfections. This looks like the controls for the gunner to hold onto, and then the sight, which has some really nice little details on it. There's a sinkhole or something in the middle, unless that is a gauge or a sight or something. Either way, you could probably either clean it up if it's not supposed to be there, or detail it up if it is. Then we've got the struts for the landing gear, and there's a little bit of a texture on like a fabric covering or something in between the strut. And then all of the other little details, which all look really quite nicely molded there. A couple of little handles here for the rockets and the fuel pods to mount to. Looks like another fuel pod, and you can actually see they've done like a texture on, or they've done a really nice job, I should say, molding the cap for that one, which is like sort of squared off. It looks really good. Couple of details here, like the radiator as well, the gun barbette. Got your two seats, which are pretty basic. You can see there's a few ejector pin marks that are in some nasty spots that you might want to clean up, but oh well, that's easy enough done. Then we've got the main landing gear itself. Detail on the landing gear tyres look really nice. You can see the tread pattern, and hopefully there won't be too much of a seam line or anything between them. There doesn't look like there's much flashing or anything to speak of, so that's a good sign. Looks like another set of radiators here. They're a little bit less detailed than the other ones here, being raised. They don't quite look as good in my opinion, but they're still not too bad. The other side of the fuselage half without the antennas, and again, details look really quite good, and there's no real imperfections of which to speak of. And finally, we've got the floor for the cockpit and the sidewalls, and as you can see, they've actually done a pretty nice job doing all of the various pilots, controls, and switches and all that. A mix of raised and recessed details. Some of the gauges might be a little bit basic, but honestly, it's not looking too bad at all there. Quite nicely detailed. And there's a nice little slot for the main instrument panel to fit into, and a little spot for the joystick. So yeah, that looks pretty nice. Here we've got the front nose section of the aircraft. There's no real detailing, I should say, on the inside of either of the fuselage sides or the nose section. It's all sort of just a flat wall, so you might want to spend a bit of time adding some ribbing or some extra detailing if you want. But yeah, the nose section looks quite nice. There's a little recessed area for the machine guns or the cannons. I believe the machine guns were the ones that went up on the sides, which looks quite nice. And then you've got a little set of radios for the rear gunner there, and some wiring and all that. And it's all raised details, which is relatively basic, but you could paint that up and have it looking really quite nice, I reckon. So yeah, details are pretty basic in a few areas, especially inside the cockpit where there's no real sidewall detail, and the instrument panels are reasonably basic, but at least there's something there to work with that you can paint up and detail to look quite nice. So that's it for all of the grey plastic. Let's have a look at the clear sprues. So, as I've mentioned, you've got three separate sections for the canopy, and I think that they've done a really good job doing it this way. The 410's got a little bit of a complicated shape to its canopy. It sort of sticks out the side here with the gunner, and as you can see, it's pretty hard to get plastic molded in that kind of shape without having some sort of imperfection. So I'm not going to judge this canopy setup too harshly, because although it's going to be a little bit tricky to glue, at least they've done their best to try and mold it that way. So you've got one side that's got sort of the main middle section as well as the left side, and then the right side is just the kind of canopy section that bulges out. And as you can see, if I put my finger through it, there's a fair bit of distortion in some of the more curved sections. But honestly, I'm quite impressed otherwise with the quality. Although the plastic is a little bit thick, there's barely any scratches, except for that one there. I don't know if you can see it. It looks a bit like a hair or something in the plastic, but that's not, yeah, it's a bit of a scratch or something. But otherwise, it looks really quite nice. There's raised details to paint the canopy frame. Front canopy is the same. It's a very complex curved kind of shape, so there's a fair bit of distortion, but at least the parts are pretty transparent and not too badly done. As for the windows for the nose section, they've got a little bit of distortion as well, but there is a fair bit of curving on them too, so I'll forgive them for that. And on the whole, they're pretty nice and clear. Honestly, they look really quite good as they are. So I'd say that's a win for the clear parts. So since I haven't actually looked at the Airfix kit in the flesh or plastic just yet, I don't really want to jump to any massive conclusions about which kit is better. Although from what I've seen and heard, I'm pretty willing to bet the Airfix kit has much nicer levels of detail, especially in terms of the cockpit and the Bombay, definitely. Because there's not an awful lot of detail really with this kit. It's definitely showing its age, but honestly still it's a really decent looking one. And given that it's retailing for around about $30 to $40 AUD, which doesn't seem too unreasonable to me given it's a relatively big twin engine aircraft, I would say it's definitely worth getting. The schemes I think in this kit are a little bit more different compared to the Airfix one. And you've got a few more options, I believe, in terms of rockets and the fuel tanks, although it is a bit of a shame it doesn't come with the famous 50mm cannon that the Airfix kit is going to be a little bit famous for, I reckon. So if you want something that's probably a little bit cheaper than the Airfix kit, that's still pretty decent, and you don't have to wait as long, then yeah, I'd recommend grabbing this one, and look forward to doing a build video on it in the future. Hopefully it won't be too long away, but you never know. Sometimes I get a little bit sidetracked or busy with lots of other projects. But I still wanted to share my inbox review of this one and give you guys the chance to have a little look at it before making a purchase of it as an alternative, or if you were still going to get this one either way, you kind of have a bit more of an idea on what you're getting into. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Big thanks to my wonderful patrons for helping me buy these kits and keep this channel going. And a big shout out to Tectonic Hobbies, the local shop on the Sunshine Coast, where you can buy this kit and of course many others and the supplies that you use to build them. That's it for now, but until the next video, model on.